All right, we'll call this Board of Directors meeting to order at 7:04 p.m. The board has a land acknowledgement and anti-racism statement that's posted on the board's website. Roll call tonight. We're missing Josh and Brian and Kanu and Sandy. Do I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
Motion to adopt the agenda.
Second.
All those in favor? All right. We will move forward to announcements. I'd just like to start off by introducing Joanne Jensen. She's our new operations manager, and she started last week. And I don't know if you want to say anything, Joanne, or?
Sure. Well, it's good to meet everyone. I can share a little bit of information about my background. I've held primarily senior management roles for the past 20 plus years in a range of mid to large size companies. Operations has always been my focus, and it's founded on early training and data collection and analytics. I've had responsibility for many diverse functions, everything from administrative, which of course is a big focus here, through logistics group, technical groups, software development, business intelligence. So I have a broad range of experience across operational organizations. For the past 3 years, I worked here at a nonprofit in Bellingham, a small company, which gave me the opportunity to see how commercially developed experience could be applied in a different setting. And I'm really glad to have this opportunity to work in a larger enterprise. So thank you.
Welcome.
Yep, welcome. Glad to have you on board. Does anybody else have any announcements? Nancy?
Yeah, I just want to remind people out there that Tuesday at 4:30, all your ideas about running for a board of directors seat turn into a pumpkin, because that is the deadline. You need to get your hard copy signed application in to the admin office by 4:30 on Tuesday. So that's my announcement. Thank you, AJ.
Any other announcements?
Yeah, I guess I'll say something about the property transfer fee refund program. So I'm sure most people are aware, like I said, the last board meeting, that property transfer fee refund program is now live. So it was the 29th is when it, which is what I said the last board meeting too, when it became live. And the main web link, so the main portal for this is on the website, and it'll be literally one of the main announcement links on the website. So you won't have to scroll to find it. It'll be right up at the top. And so I guess just, I'll just summarize. There's an announcement on the website. There will be an announcement coming out in the views as well. So just kind of put into a quick nutshell. So the program, so basically for this priority deadline filing, it'll be September 30. So you want to get your claim forms in, whether or not you submit it on the website, or if you submit it by mail, just make sure it's postmarked by September 30 and send it in, and then it'll be processed. It'll take them through October to process it. And then they expect to have the first payments, or these payments, to go out around mid-November or so, mid to late November, depending on where they have to mail these payments to. Of course, you do have the option of having it direct deposited into your bank account as well. So that'll cut out the mailing time that it takes for something like that. So, and then the three things that you definitely want to have is you want to have your final closing statement, which will clearly show your buyer transfer fee amount that you paid. You want your state issued ID, obviously a copy of that, your division and lot number for your properties. And those are really the three things you'll need. And then the rest of that is just literally just filling out the claim form and sending it in. Obviously, if you do it on the website, should be nice and efficient and easy. Or you could fill it out by by hand on a paper form and send that in as well too. So Epic is the company, a third-party servicer. So they also mailed out the official claim forms and a notice, a claim notice, and also like an insert, a frequently asked questions insert in that mailing. And so they would have done this probably around the 29th. So if you haven't received it yet, you should be receiving it like very shortly at this point. So, but I guess that would be basically that's the whole program in a nutshell at this point. So hopefully everything's going well with this in terms of logistically people being able to apply for this through the website or through the mail. So that's it for that program.
Thanks, Joel.
Yeah.
Any other announcements? All right, hearing none, we'll move on to property owner comments.
Yeah, 11 people with us tonight. So if you'd like to jump in for property owners comments, looks like this is the only property owners comments we got going on tonight. So if you'd like to jump in, just use raise hand in Zoom. And we've got a hand raised from Carla. I'll go ahead and bring you on over here. You just give your name and address, please.
Howdy, all. Carla Ward, 201 Harborview Drive. And I have a question. I looked at the agenda and the agenda packet. The agenda includes a proposed bylaw amendment, but I didn't find that in the packet unless it was the narrative about the petition process. So I just was looking for clarification. Thank you.
Yeah, we're just having an initial discussion on that tonight to see if we are going to spend the time and effort on putting something together.
Thank you, Carla. Go ahead and return you to the attendees. And anybody else would like to jump in here, just use raise hand in Zoom. Got Linda. Linda, I'll go ahead and bring you on over. If you could give your name and address, please.
5 Wisteria Lane. I have some different questions, so hopefully I'd love to go back to Joel with questions about the transfer fee. If there's just one line on the closing statement for the transfer fee, does that include the capital amount and the standard 125 that's an ops fee?
I believe with this, so like I checked with both Gil and also with the title company in terms of the closing statement. So there should be a separate line just for the property transfer fee itself, and then another line for that $125 amount, just the flat fee closing part of it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And the other question I had is initially when you guys discussed this, you talked about a 60 or 90-day window. Don't you think 30 days is awfully short for folks, especially because some people might be out of the area now? I don't know. I don't know that everybody lives here because I think some sellers may have paid that fee.
I can answer that question. So actually, so in terms of, yeah, I guess maybe a little inside baseball. So, maybe I shouldn't say this, but I'll go ahead and say it. In terms of like that September deadline, the end of September, when Epic first said, yeah, let's do the September deadline, then even I myself said, hey, isn't that kind of cutting it short? Or, maybe we should give them till October 15th. But they said that, no, through their experience, because of course, keep in mind, they do this for a living, that through their experience, if you want to really maximize the participant rate up front, then to go with that deadline. And then, so how it's going to go is once that deadline comes and goes, and then Epic, myself will take a look at the response rate and then look at like a new deadline to do like another round of this. Of course, I kind of defeat the Epic's purpose a little by saying that, but in reality, that's how it's going to go. So yeah, so basically with Epic, it was, if you want to maximize the response rate up front, then go with this deadline.
Okay, my last question to you about that is what so let's say you leave it open for a year or for 6 months or whatever, when you're sure that everybody has claimed it, what happens to the unclaimed? Does that go to the state as unclaimed property of these people that have been notified that this is theirs?
No, like we have no plans to give that to the state. At this point, the program will be left open for, a reasonable amount of time to try to return this to whoever wants it at this point. And then I guess we'll reevaluate at that point, like in some time in the future. But, but whether it takes like another deadline or a deadline after that, of course, that's the sort of stuff that we'll start to determine once we see the response rate from this first deadline, when that comes and goes.
Okay, then the last one I have for you is you're doing the June financial reports. When are you going to present the second quarter capital reports? Because those would be due in June.
Yeah, actually, that is a great point, Linda, and that actually should be in this one tonight. But with everything going on right now, that one actually fell through the cracks. So I can put that on the next month's financial statements when I do that.
Okay, that's fine. I just was curious because it wasn't there. The other ones I have, and then I'm done, is for Nancy. I have a question about your petition process. I wondered, you didn't have anything about observers for the vetting process. I know with one of our vettings we did, I think it was for when there was another recall. I know Director Volt actually sat in during that with another one from the group that had presented the petition, but I didn't see anywhere you accounted for any observers in that. And also, I didn't see anywhere, and I had asked you about this before, about if there's a question by the people that have the petition, is there an audit process you have where you can sit down with somebody and look at stuff and explain it? I know this one was really, really close, and normally that's never been an issue for me, but I didn't see that in there. And then there was this whole thing about private volunteers, and it's maybe just me because I've done N&E so long. I think that raises questions for people of, well, that whoever is doing this and volunteering really should be a totally neutral person. And if it's private, there's no way anybody knows that for sure. And that's all I've got. So thank you if you can answer those questions for me when you get to that part of the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda.
If you want me to wait till then, I'll have to write them down. Because I probably would have forgotten them. Do you want me to talk about them now?
If you want to, I'm willing to wait until it's your turn.
AJ, it's your call.
Yeah, why don't we it's got an agenda item, so let's just,
Okay.
we can go over things with the agenda item,
Okay.
Thank you.
just to keep it all in one place.
Thank you.
That's fine.
Thanks, Linda. I'll go ahead and return you to the attendees. All right, anybody else for property owners' comments?
All right, not seeing any,
Okay,
so I'll pass the meeting over to Joel to go over the financials.
Okay, I'll go ahead and share the screen here. Oh, by the way, I should have added too, when I was talking about that property transfer fee, I know like in the community, there's a little confusion because the link became active before like an announcement was made. And actually the reason why that happened was because like on the last board meeting, I said it would be August 29th, which actually was the day that it became, that the link was really live for people, but actually so I was going to post that announcement when I posted it in which I did around, I don't know, it was around noon or so on the 29th, but then previously, like So actually here in this department, my people had the address, and then someone actually asked for them an address like before that, so then they kind of jumped the gun, just handed it out, and that's actually what caused that unneeded confusion at first. So that's why that happened. But I mean, luckily it was literally just a few hours later when the official announcement popped up on the website. Okay, now obviously everyone can see this balance sheet, the financial statements right here. So what you're looking at right here, which I always start out with, is the balance sheet. And so, I mean, the biggest thing with this balance sheet at this point is there's nothing really too exciting to talk about on this balance sheet. Everything looks fine. But what I will say is, so what you'll start to see in July, beginning in July, because that 1850 Lake Wacom Boulevard building closed officially in July. So then that's where you're going to see this SURF loan amount right here basically be replaced with a new SURF loan. So this SURF loan that you're looking at has been paid off as a part of that new loan. So then you'll see the amount go up. So, and the reason why it's going up is because it's absorbing this amount plus, around $1 million or so for that building. And which also is another good point in terms of, so the board also directed for $500,000 of that building purchase to be paid out of the 2021's operating surplus money. So then in July, that's where you'll see down in this section, that's where you'll see me basically transferring away like 500,000, like in operating equity to capital equity at that point. And then you'll also see this, if you see a cash, big cash drop, that's what that is. I'm literally moving money away from up in here, 500,000 to down into the SURF category. But then it just went right back out again, obviously during the payment of the building. So those would be the big kind of difference that you'll see starting in the July financial statements. Balance sheet, since that stuff happened in July. So now we'll just fast forward here to the income statement here, and I'll just hit on a couple of big highlights. So our collection rate right now is 93%, or excuse me, I mean the budgeted collection rate is 93%. And so right now in June, so we're sitting at 96.9%, so practically 97% in June. And like I said before, the good thing about coming in with a collection rate over what we're budgeted is for every 1% that we're over the 93% rate, that's approximately about $22,000 more coming in that wasn't budgeted, which that's the great thing. So, so for every percent that we're over, there's another 22,000 showing up to operations. And I've calculated July's collection rate, and July, so we're at 96.9. July, we took back just a little to 96.6, but still a really nice, a good collection rate at this point. And as opposed to like last year in 2021, we had a collection rate of 94.5% in June of 2021, and we still finished out the year at 95.5% at the end of December 2020. So since we're budgeted for 93%, we're tracking obviously to do a lot better than we did last year, which is good, which is a good positive. Now, if we just get right down here to the bottom line, you'll see net income, which obviously is just all these revenues minus the expenses for operations only. That's what we're looking at, operations, but this is what we budgeted for. So this is the most important number I would say at this point is, so we're sitting at about 118,168 in terms of operating surplus at the end of June. So last year, because I compared this to last year, meaning, so where were we at the end of June of 2021? We were at about 254,106. So that gives us the difference about 136,000 in rounding this difference between last year and this year. Then of course, the next thing I do is look at, well, what were the main kind of the big line items that started triggering those sorts of differences? And then that would literally be in the, well, I'll just tell you. So it's like, so basically hazardous trees, we've really spent a lot on hazardous trees this year from the year before. So another 31,500, I'm rounding these numbers, extra spent on hazardous trees this year than last year. Legal services, about 52,000 more. So we had some things going on this year. Like for example, like billing type things or things involving the kitchen remodel and all of that stuff with the Elegave upstairs. requiring legal type advice. And the good thing about legal expenses, even though legal is higher this year by 52,000, this is something that doesn't just occur every single year. So it's not like, oh, it's not like utilities to where for a fact that's going to happen again next year, So it's like legal expenses become kind of one-offs from year to year in terms of, even though it's higher in one year, that doesn't mean that it'll just be higher again in the next year. So it's a very case-by-case basis. We do have about, around 18,000 in utilities extra this year versus last year. And also payroll has gone up this year versus last year because that CBA was signed in October of 2021, which kicked in all those union pay raises or pay increases, I should say, that obviously, go into 2022, that was not the case, obviously, in 2021. So those sorts of things start to factor in. And also hiring people like, for example, like the prior ops manager and like the rec director and stuff like that. So then because when we use like Kelly Services for like headhunting type firms, which a lot of businesses do, then you'll end up having this kind of one-time, like a payment that you're going to have to pay for that fee, which obviously those sorts of things we don't look to repeat as well. Good thing is it didn't cost us a cent to get Joanne, so she's saving us money immediately right off the bat. So in terms of, I do talk about the revenue or the expense to revenue ratio. It's just basically just telling you how much of your expenses, like as compared to the revenues. So we're sitting around 94% for June 2022. Last year, obviously, since we had a higher net income, we would expect that ratio to be lower. Lower is all, is better in this case. So it's 88%. And obviously, just that alone, the difference in the net income, triggers the difference in those types of ratios, in that ratio in particular. Now, if we move on to the next page, the reserve cash balance page right here. And like I always say, this is a really handy page because this shows you what we're projecting at the end of 2022. This is what we're projecting for at the end of June to have in the SURF account. But this also takes into account what the board has approved at this point. So meaning the board's approved, this is what they've approved, this 594.56 approved, and we haven't yet, like for example, let's just say the board went out and spent 100,000 on something and it was all spent, then you would see that showing up here in the actual cash outlay. But then right down here is what we're still on the hook for, so to speak, that the board has formally approved. And this is how much cash could also go out the door. So we just automatically assume that it will to approve for projects that have not yet been billed, invoiced, or paid for. And then we have this board recommended carryover balance where we take away the 600,000. Then that's what gives us the final 2.5 million net usable cash at the end of 2022. This balance obviously is going to be different from the balance that was in the capital budgeting document that you saw in the 2022 budget, the 2023 budget document that's on the website that we talked about, the last two board meetings that we specifically spent on the budget. And that's the reason why is because that balance is more strict. It's taking into account not just what the board approved, but what the board could also approve. That's on the slate for 2022 that could also be approved outstanding that could affect the beginning 2023 balance. So that's why you'll see that number lower than this number, because that number is looking ahead at what the board could approve that's kind of on the budget capital spending plan, and we just take it away from that balance immediately for January 1, 2023 starting balance. So basically, SURF Rhodes, all of these, the same format, they work the same. SURF and Rhodes are up. Obviously, this becomes a function of how much money we're spending on things, how much the board is approving to be spent on stuff, and and how much cash is coming in from dues, and so it becomes a function of literally kind of those sorts of things that affect the cash balances. Now here you'll see, and I've talked about this before in previous months, but since we've been talking about property transfer fees, those refund program, I'll talk about it again. But that's the amount in that fund, capital reserve holding fund. That's what that was. When anyone paid that fee, it automatically went into this account. You'll see this transfer out when the board, so we're transferring that out of this fund and just putting into what I'm calling the SURF capital reserve holding cash fund right here. And then down here, we're just just to be on the safe side, we're just assuming it'll all get paid out. So that's why we don't budget for any cash with this. Mailbox fund here. So basically serve Rhodes mailboxes. So they're all up from the previous year at this point, June 2021, and especially mailbox because we haven't spent anything on mailboxes. So we automatically assume this to be going up from year to year. Then we have our UDR account here. Same thing applies, just cash that we have, what the board has approved to be spent out of UDR, obligated expenses versus the cash we've already spent, then gives us an ending cash balance. So that's basically, and this is the fund when, like for example, the property transfer refund fee, third-party servicer charges come out of this fund that the board approves. So the board has to approve this fund, no different than surf and roads and mailboxes. So anything that comes out of this fund has to be approved by the board. And by the way, the big thing that goes into this fund, so I'll just go ahead and I'll just say it again. But so basically, when someone is behind on their dues, so in this case, someone who hasn't paid their dues, even in 2021, when they bring their account current in 2022, then the operating portion of those of their dues from 2021 and before, then go into this fund right here. So that's where the cash goes. So like prior year's dues don't go to prop up current year's budget, so to speak. It all goes into the UDR fund. But with the exception of surf and roads and mailboxes, so if someone paid same person who paid their dues from 2021, and then they're becoming current 2022. So if they owed their dues, obviously, what a portion of that would be surf and roads. That just goes automatically right to those funds, surf and roads and mailboxes. And I guess what I'll do, maybe in the interest of time, so we're looking at the income statements right here. We're looking at, again, it's the same thing as you saw on the second page, but it's split up by department. So now you can see how each department represents like the bottom line net income numbers. And so we have one for month to date. This is just the current month, only for the month of June. And then we have another one year to date. So we'll just go ahead and talk about this one since we're already into June. And so this covers January 1, 2022 through the end of June 30, 2022. And so you'll see like the various departments, that contribute better for worse, to the bottom line. Like, like right now, administrations, it's running 56,242 worse than budget. What's contributing to that? It'd be stuff like contracted professional services, meaning like invoices for express for temporary labor. Actually, when Rich was hired, there was a good one-time headhunting fee that contributes to this as well. It's 56,000. Common costs. The biggest thing in common costs is going to be, remember that legal line item that I talked about? Legal comes out of common costs. So that's where you're seeing that. ACC security, this 34,039. Worse than budget. That's all trees basically. This is the tree removal type where we're spending over what we budgeted at that point in time. Now for golf, since I always do talk about golf, I'll just quickly talk about golf this time. So the revenue for golf, 576,326 year to date for golf. Last year, this time they're at 616,421. So they're about $40,000 less revenue in golf at the end of June than they were at June 2021. But Brian did, when I talked to him not too long ago, he also did indicate that his revenue figures have also really started picking up as well. So he's hitting a good stretch in golf again. In terms of actual salary, in terms of the expenses for golf, so it's made up of salary and benefits, and then all other expenses right here. So those two added together comes up to about $451,573. Last year they had about $440,699. So their expenses are about, it's not a huge difference, not a huge increase, but about 11,000 rounded higher than last year. But also, like I said before, with the with even like salary costs and stuff like that. So the salary costs have gone up obviously because of golf's not immune as well to the union as well. So union type salary rates also apply to golf the same as everyone else. So he's experiencing more salary costs this year than before the collective bargaining agreement was enforced. So his net income for golf, about 125,000 at the end of June. last year, obviously, because of those differences I just talked about between revenue and expenses, it's about 175,000. So his total net income is about $51,000 less this time than last year. But like I said, talking to Brian, sounds like his numbers have picked up here as well, meaning like just seasonality of the golf playing. But I would say those are the big high points of the financial statements. If anyone had any questions.
I got a couple.
Sure, yeah.
Back to the financial statements. There's just, I mean, I look at this and I try to figure it out. So you can explain it to me. On the first page, when we go under member equity, I'm trying to figure out, because I mean, halfway through the year, those net income operations, special assessment, income, all of those, it should be around 50% of last year if we're kind of on target, but they're not. Like net income operations is way off. And then we have the capital is higher and member equity is higher. So just, can you explain those numbers to me? They don't make sense to me. I'm trying to figure it out.
Okay, so this right here, this net income from operations. So this line item right here.
Yeah,
That's
all those ones.
Yeah. So we'll just look at this 37,809. Well, actually, this 37,809 is going to be regular operations with the exception of the rec. So rec, parks, pools, with the exception of that,
Right.
and UDR as well. So like these two added together, 37,809 plus 13,534 will equal this 51,343 right
Mhm.
here. And you also had a question about,
Well, why is it so different from last year? Because I'm thinking it should be about half and it's not close. Like you're looking at 37,809 for the first line compared to 430,227. And I
Yeah,
don't
that's just-
understand how you get those numbers, why those numbers are like that.
so those things, gosh, I wish, let me see if, no, I don't have it open, but let me try to find it real quick. Because what'll make it a lot easier to see is I'm going to pull up the same time period in 2021. You can see this, right? Can you see that it says 2021 right here?
Mhm.
Yeah.
So those numbers, okay.
So actually, that's not the best. That's not the best way to show it because this is at the end of December as well. So
Yeah.
yeah. So what you're looking at right here, first of all, is this is only for, you know, like you said, this is only through June, and whereas this is through December. Now,
Right.
keep another big thing, so the big line items that are going to make a big difference between 2021 and 2020, in this 430,227 right here is
Mhm.
also that $357,000 roughly PPP loan forgiveness. So that amount is really propping up this number. And obviously, if we plugged in the 357 into this column, you'd see how the numbers would really start to kind of equalize.
Right.
But that one number in and of itself is going to be responsible for such a big swing between at the end of 2021 versus 2022 in June.
Right. Okay, and all the first three seem to be off though too. Like right, special assessment is, 13 compared to 63 for the year. So it's like a quarter of what it was last year. And net income capital is way off too. It's 43,000 compared to, am I reading that? Yeah. Oh, sorry, 843 compared to 2 million. So I mean, that was not too far off, less off than the others, I guess, in some ways.
Mhm. Yeah, and all of these will literally just be a function of just the actual the net income numbers themselves. So like, for example, with capital reserves, there's the 843,626. And then, and what also is happening too in here is, and then you'll start to see this with the June financial statement. So the June balance sheet is at that point is going to get like a true up, so to speak, with audit numbers going in there. What I mean is year-end audit adjustments that happen every single year. So like before we send the trial balance off to the auditor. So that's where like a depreciation expense and stuff like that really trues up as well. But these numbers will literally just be a difference between net income numbers from one period to another. And so what you're looking at here in this case is, this is the end of December versus this is the end of June.
Right.
But
So you're saying that the final months will even it out more on that one?
possibly, yes, meaning like, yes.
It just, I'm just trying to understand it as I go through
Yeah.
this. And then on page 2, I'm looking at rental income and lease income. And we're really low on that. And I'm trying to, I know that El Agave had given a large amount, and we have the library and the NCTK. Why are those numbers so low?
Yeah, the thing, like, for example, with this one, like a big item, is you already just mentioned is El Agave. So when we got the check from El Agave, the June books, the June GL was already closed up, so it didn't get its way into June.
They also aren't paying the full budgeted amount. Like we
Right,
budgeted
yeah.
for a full lease amount. So that's these numbers compared to budgeted amount are lower than they were projected and what they were last year.
Yeah. Why wasn't it being put in the GL for those first few months? Like what they owed, like there was no entries in GL up to the end of May.
Well, for one thing, like there's a slight time period to where, because the attorney, like got involved in terms of how much that the bill should actually be to them, because since the kitchen was closed down, so it's working out what is the correct ratio to bill them for it, and that became an agreement between El Agave and us as well, that that involved like legal attorneys like on both ends at that point. So there was like a little lag period where there was a little kind of that was a little up in the air in terms of the agreed upon ratio of how much that both sides were willing to agree on.
Yeah, why didn't you just do, I don't know, like I'm just like trying to learn this, so I'm not trying to be difficult. I'm just trying to figure it all out. But why wouldn't you put in the GL and then do an adjusting entry if a agreement came on that was different?
That's one thing that could have been done. Yeah, on one hand, we could have opened up the GL, and actually, we really wanted to be precise about it. To open up the GL, then start putting it into the respective months, like 1 month at a time. And then the other option is to do a catch-up entry, is what it's called, where you open it up and put it in as a catch-up. Now, I can tell you, like, from a pure auditing standpoint, the auditors themselves they won't really care as much if it went into 1 month or another one, because they're auditing like an entire year at that point. So they're looking at the operating performance like over a whole 12-month period. Now, quite frankly, from a presentation standpoint, if at the time, to be quite honest, if I thought this one issue would have become such an issue out there in the community, that's what I would have done. I would have just gone and opened up the GL and plugged in each, 1 month at a time, instead of like doing a catch-up entry.
All right, and so last question, contracted and professional services. 241, 350, budgeted was 151. What's that?
So I'll show you.
It's off by 151, sorry.
So the good thing about these statements is so this is going beyond the departmental summaries, like meaning current month, year to date. Then if you go to the next couple of pages, so then we can actually drill right down to that section, like what makes up that section right here. And then this is precisely, so now we can see the big differences. So we can see the big difference right here is other professional services. And then what goes into stuff like other professional services is going to be things like express. So like express invoices, headhunting type fees, stuff like that. Like those are the things that we don't normally typically budget for, meaning like we don't budget to not have someone like in the admin office, and then we have to like be billed through express. But then also at the same time, of course, it's getting a little obscured this year because the difference in the union rates is in situations like this, then you'll see where like labor, like budgeted labor expenses also are down because of that as well, since the expense is actually going to this other professional services, but then not to the corresponding type expense would not be going to the labor line item. But that's largely what makes up this area. And that's what kind of causes something to look to be over budget, because we don't tend to budget for other contracted professional services. It's not something that we typically want to do from year to year. We'd rather have like an employee do it or whatever, but if we have to contract out for whatever reason, whether it's, to like cover the front office, or if it's to work on the side of the building or something like that, and we didn't really see fit to run it through capital at that point, so we'll go ahead and bill that out to like a contractor, then that would show up also in other professional services.
Is P&W in there? Because when I was looking at stuff, there was like 100,000 in admin department for P&W, which that was kind of confusing when I was looking at the GL. But so P&W would be in there as well?
Yes, there are some invoices from P&W in this category as well.
Okay, why is P&W being billed to admin?
Billed to what? Excuse me?
Admin?
To administration.
Yeah, it's $100,000. Unless I read something wrong, $100,000 in the admin department for P&W.
Yeah, P&W, like, seems like that was a few months ago, but it was centered around safety services that he was providing that we would contract out for. We originally had it all, actually his invoices all going to maintenance at the time, because that's typically where like a category where that would go, like other repair and maintenance or other professional services. But then we actually looked at that more closely to see, like some of his invoices actually, to be more on a granular level, should have been split out and put into like the admin department. I believe that was the safety and security services.
Okay. All right, thanks, Joel.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, if you were to look at prior months before that, you would see that chunk of money actually was in the maintenance department. Then we actually shifted it out of there, actually, after talking to other people, like to get a better understanding of where that actually should have gone.
Yeah, I just couldn't figure out why P&W was an admin.
Yeah.
And it just kind of was off. But,
right.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. But yeah, going back to this, like when you were talking about, asking about, which is a good question, quite frankly. It's a good financial accounting question, actually. But what's making up these line items right here in the equity amounts is basically you're looking at the change in the equity from one year to the other, which is triggered by income, whether it's capital or operating type income. And these can all be actually traced right back to like financial statements. So if you look between one year and the other and then mathematically like figure the difference between them, you would see how it's driving the difference of these numbers.
Yeah, thanks.
Sure. Do you want me to stop the screen share?
Yes, please.
Sure. Any other questions for Joel? All right, we will keep moving on to new business. We have a draft reserve study. I think the board got an email on this earlier today. And so this is just part of the budget planning, documents that we have. And yeah, I think there is some corrections that Joel had proposed that needed to happen after reviewing it, the first draft of it, and that's kind of where it's at right now. So I don't know if Joel or Sonia want to speak to anything.
So Joel, do you
see.
want to just, yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Sure,
Just
yeah.
why don't you go through the bullet points of what's going to be changed? We're not going to screen share it because it is a draft right now. And, but we expect that those changes will be made. we'll be able to release it next week so the community can see it and everything, but we just don't want to create any confusion by putting an unfinished document out. But Joel can quickly touch on what those bullet points are, and then if you guys have any questions, because it's real important that we kind of address this week if there are questions or budget questions, because we're going to be voting on the budget next week. But there will not be time to readjust things or address them next week, because we have to take that vote, and that AGM booklet needs to be done by the next day. So, go ahead, Joel.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so typically like how these reserve studies go is, of course, this is the part with the reserve study, which is a pain, quite frankly, from my position. But, you know, when the reserve study comes back, then it's the laborious task of going through and reviewing the line items and stuff, and what kind of changes need to be made, or what presentation changes should be made to the tables. And of course, and then we're dealing with a new company, so then it's not going to look like how it looks from the last one. So that takes a little longer too. And so that's why there's a little delay when the board got the draft, because we're actually hoping, you know, I was hoping that, oh, once we send the changes to him, and maybe he'll get them back really quickly, and then that can be incorporated. Then I can get back to the board. But then it came down to, I just send him the draft and the list of changes with it as well. But the biggest change, I mean, I guess maybe I probably won't go through this like line by line. I'll just hit on some important changes. But like, for example, like the reserve studies and stuff like this happens like you originally had on the reserve study form, or so things that really drive kind of differences. But these are actually, quite frankly, very easy changes to make, meaning once he makes a change, it's all software, so it just rips right through and applies it to the whole document. So like, for example, having total billable units, he showed 2678. Of course, that's one of the main ones, right? Told him to change that to 3,124. And that's kind of a big change, because that also, one of the numbers, and it's actually one of the required numbers to be put on in the budget document as well, like during the AGM ballot mail out is, let me find it here. Okay, so one of the numbers that we have to put on there is basically the deficit or surplus on a fully funded basis, and then the average, or then the per unit average. Of course, in this case, the average is easiest. That's every person pays the same amount, especially as it relates to capital. It's all the same amount, no matter if you're vacant lot or developed lot. But then that will actually drive down that average, since with the lower number, it actually shows a per unit average of that deficit to be higher. Once that new number is plugged in there, then that average comes down, since you're working with a larger number of units to spread that across. But those, I mean, that's a big change. That's actually a bigger change than it sounds like. But other big changes would just be looking at going through and having him kind of remove line items that shouldn't be in there, certain costs, like, for example, like and some are a little big, like the irrigation system that became kind of a holdover from the last reserve study, where it basically kind of looks like it was doubling up the irrigation system replacement cost. And then one of those is removed. So that really kind of drops it down by, you know, like 400,000 or so, just right there in one shot. So there are a handful of asset ID line items going through, telling him to remove those, couple adding, you know, especially as well. Even like with Rhodes, removing items like Spring Road, things like that, because that'll be incorporated into other items in the Rhodes plan, and it won't be redone like in a separate line item like that. But basically, I mean, without going through them one line item at a time, which might get kind of uninteresting, basically the bottom line is the reserve study will come back and it will reflect a different deficit, you know, on an average basis. And also the tables will change, the percent funded will change based off of especially removing items out of there that, or reducing costs out of there that should have been removed or reduced or what have you.
And also just calculating it correctly, because what he did is that number that Joel quoted was actually just developed lots. And once you add in all the vacant lots, it changes that percentage pretty dramatically about how funded the reserves are, or somewhat dramatically. But most of those changes, other than what he did mention, they're all pretty insignificant changes. They don't really add up to a lot. Just the one item, and like he said, that was it was a repeat because of the way that was it was coded. Basically, it was showing that $400 was in another code, basically on the irrigation system. So it made it look like we paid $885,000 as opposed to $485 when you're looking at the reserves. And so obviously what we're trying to do with this is, the reserve study, because what we're trying to do is start aligning the reserve study with our actual capital planning, because in the past that had not been occurring. So we had reserve studies and then we had the 10-year capital plan, and they weren't in alignment. So we spent the last 2 years, we started this last year, and then last year it was a level 3 reserve study. So all we could really do is remove items that didn't exist, like a non-existent building that had never, we had almost 12 million or 14 million in buildings that we removed that had never been built. That impacts the reserves and how much it appears to be funded. So we corrected that last year, but we didn't make any other changes. So this year, these changes become more in alignment with the reports and the studies that we've been having the engineers come in with and everything, since the end of last year. And so this is all part of our capital planning, and it'll keep it in alignment, so that it actually can be used as a budgeting and planning tool. And then as AJ talked about when we were talking about the budget, so there's also the Rhodes Reserve. I know I jumped around, Joel, but so there's also the Rhodes Reserve study. And like with the Rhodes Reserve study, that once we get the engineering report, that will start to drill down and start actually breaking down roads and areas much more specifically, because what we know from what we're already hearing is that that road reserve and that plan is not appropriate. It's not enough. Like, it does mention culverts. It talks about repaving or repairing roads, but we have a lot of drainage issues, but also, and AJ can speak to this more, but shoulder issues, ditching issues that really need to be addressed in the long range planning of what we do with our roads over time. So that'll also begin to expand and be more detailed, next year. Sorry, Joe.
No, that's fine.
Since I was going to ask about the deficit per unit, but you already covered that. There's going to be some changes in that. I just had 2 other minor questions. I didn't see mailboxes, and didn't that used to be a third item? Did that just get putting in one of the other, like in Kerf? Or?
No, actually, that's a great question because of the mailbox. So there is a third separate study for mailboxes. This is actually one of the changes that he needed. Meaning, he just needed to know he didn't, for some reason, have the beginning, the January 1, 2023 starting reserve balance and the amount of dues, like the annual dues. So it's like those are 2 pieces of information that I also gave him with those changes. So once he plugs those in, then he can just generate a report immediately at that point.
So we'll get an update on that. And then are we going to, there's last year, I think it was at 33% funded, and this year's report says 21% funded. Is that going to stay the same?
It's not accurate because of the calculation is wrong based on the number of units. So we'll have the real.
Actually with that funding rate, of course, that one won't matter in terms of like the amount of units that we have. So the number of units that we have won't change.
Oh, are you talking about the mailboxes?
Yeah. No, she's just talking about the actual percent funded, the far right column number. So that one will stay. That one won't be affected by units, but what will affect that will be the anticipated expenditures. And then that will actually drop a little once he removes those line items that we told him to remove. Then once that drops, the percent funded actually will go up mathematically as well. In that case.
Right, that's what I'm saying. The percent funded is going to change. Like when you're looking at the tables, I thought that's what you were talking about, that it will actually go up.
Yeah, that was asking what it was. So that's perfect. Thanks
so
for that. It'll
The
get,
email that was sent over, just so you know, so at the bottom of the email, it gives the detail about the mailbox, the dollar amount and stuff and there will be a separate mailbox.
Yeah.
Report. He just didn't. We just don't
I
have
started
it.
this morning and it's 83 pages. It's easy to miss stuff up, you know, in like an hour of looking at stuff. But so a lot of those, I'm sure that'll be answered when we get the updated study. Thank you.
So one thing I do want to point out that might pop up when you look at it, because there's not a lot of discrepancies between the budget, what the proposed budget is, and the reserve study, but there are a couple of things that, like you'll see that both of the tennis courts are in the reserve study to be replaced in 2023. And that's because they are at the end of their useful life. But what we decided, right, is that we determined that we would refurbish the rec corridor tennis courts and then reevaluate what we want to do about those arena tennis courts. Because right now we actually don't know how many people really want to play tennis, if there's something else we need to do with those courts. You know, you have people that want just all pickleball, maybe nothing. You know, that's something we really need to see it, because right now we know that they're not in great shape. So it's hard to get an accurate number of how many people would actually use those courts, and if it makes sense to spend that kind of money on a second one. Any other questions? Okay. Well, I think that's pretty much it for we're expecting that early next week. So we'll have the final one hopefully early, and then we'll resend the budget and the reserve study out to everybody. And then we'll meet on Thursday to vote on the AGM election packet. So now we can turn it over to Nancy.
Okay. Moving on to the SGM results. You're on mute still, Nancy.
It would have been a really short discussion. Anyway, there's a letter in your agenda packet which shows the totals, and it's a little different form this year than we've had in previous years. I tried to make it something that's readable rather than a spreadsheet with a lot of numbers on it. Because I do know when you do that to most people, it's like they don't even look at it. But, and in any case, I was surprised that our turnout went to 38, little over 38%. I thought it was going to be less, but I'm delighted. So let's hope it gets even better for the AGM. And basically, I'll run through it quickly. There were 3,124 ballots mailed, and that's the number of lots. And of that 3,124, we got back 1,201 votes. And those were comprised of 928 that were mailed directly to the UNELEC post office, 250 that were dropped in the ballot box outside admin, and 23 that were cast the day of the SGM. But all the ballots cast don't get counted because we throw out members who are not good at standing. There were 11 ballot envelopes that were not signed. 2 of them. And ballot envelopes that were returned with no ballot. Empty. I don't know if some of that's oversight or some of it is by design. No way to know. I did notice for people who forget to sign it, they have multiple lots and they missed one of them, of their lots to sign, one of their envelopes to sign. So if you have multiple lots, count the number of times you sign and it should equal the number of lots you have. So out of the 1,185 ballots that were actually counted, we only had 1,183 that were valid because 3 of the envelopes had ballots in them, but the ballots were not marked. So there were no votes to count. And I can't explain that either. So the results is also on the page. Both recalls failed. So that's pretty much, rather than reading more numbers, that pretty much sums it up. Are there any questions? So
yeah. Well, I have a comment first. I would just like to point out that I had 18% more votes to keep me on the board than I received to put me on the board. So I want to thank all of those people for their support. So thanks for that. But I also want to say I'm one of those people that sealed my envelope without the ballot in there, which I'm sure you noticed there was all that tape all over that thing, because these the secret envelope was white this year. And so it was, I sealed it up and I'm like, oh my gosh, I put everything in the wrong envelope. And so at the AGM, are we going to go back to a colored inner envelope?
I haven't asked that question, but as I understand the AGM, it'll be what it usually is. What happened with this Sgm is, we bought the AGM stuff back in March just to make sure, we had the right size envelopes and all that. But the petitions were just kind of out of sequence surprise. So we took what they had.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you.
Anything else?
Do we need to make a motion to?
Yes, you need to approve it, please. I could make the motion, I think.
Go for it.
I move the board approve the Sgm certification report dated August 13th for the Sgm.
I second that.
All right. All those in favor? All right. That passes.
Thank you.
Move on to the N&E manual and keeping it with Nancy.
Okay. What this petition vetting process document was aimed at is consistency. The goal is to have a list of how to go through a petition, what you should see, and you could hand it to a dozen people and give them all a copy of the same petition, and you'd come back with the same number of valid signatures. Because that is not kind of what has been happening with petitions. People are very subjective. What happens is, oh, I know that person. Well, that's not a basis to accept a signature. It has to be completely filled out. You need to have your printed name, your signature, and your address of your property. And lack of those 3 things, all of those 3 things, was the number one reason signatures got thrown out. But it's so simple because it's right on the top of the petition. This is what you're supposed to fill out. Division lot was optional. Very few people put that in because I think not that many people know it on the top, just off the top of their head. Let's see, I think Linda had a question about volunteers and observers. We didn't contemplate observers. For one thing, we ended up in a small room at a crowded table in the summer when it was hot and no AC. It was not a place you could even have observers because it was kind of crowded, but we took what we could get. The volunteers, it is very helpful if whoever arranges and manages the petition puts their name on a cover letter. This was very unusual to get something anonymous because petition managers normally want you to know who they are and what they stand for. There was no signature. There was a website address that went to a real estate's run office as a manager. And there's nobody to contact in something like that. Had there been a manager, I would have called up and said, do you want to submit someone for a volunteer? But that just didn't happen. So we just sort of informally asked around. And, I asked for staff and I got Dan one time and Rich the other. I also do not think it's the right thing to have these streamed or anything like that, because it's just volunteers may not want people to know who they are. It's their prerogative if they want to say who they are. And you can read about, we did a double bookkeeping sort of counting system to make sure we added up to the right thing, to the same number for each count. And I guess the rest of it is what makes a valid signature. And you can read those. Those were trial and error, but it worked. In the end, all three petitions were analyzed to the same standard. And that was the goal. So Sonia, did you have your hand up?
You had mentioned a question in the owner comments. So one of the things she was asking about is, what about an opportunity to sit down for you to explain the issues you had? And I just want to point out that that's exactly why it can't happen. If you put forward a petition representative, and that's the person that is representing all of the signers on that, and then you would have had a right to communicate, you'd have standing. Otherwise, it would take someone that signed the petition to take legal action and request that. It's not like Nancy knows who to sit down and talk with, because there's nothing that states that this person's a petition representative, and no one requested. Nobody came forward.
Right.
Right. And the other thing I think is really important is that the elected in an E committee members were present, except Michael. So they were present during the entire time, as were our senior managers the entire time. So I just thought I'd throw that out there.
Steve Workman and I were the representatives because Michael, it's his summer is his busy time and he could not take time off. Steve had Friday mornings off on his work schedule. So that's when we met. and we scrounged up a room. We got the library room. Not as our first choice of times, but at least we got a place we could sit with a electric outlet so I could have the laptop with a Excel spreadsheet, a couple of them to reference. It was not an ideal system. It took 2 weeks because the petitions were so very close. And we went through multiple times. So till we knew we were getting the same answer each time. That was not something I was happy with. I probably had 60 hours in those things. And, you know, I'm retired. That's not what I wanted to do with my retirement. So enough of my ranting. Taimee, do you have something you want to say?
I do. You know, I just want to, like, in this thing, whatever anybody feels one way or the other, but this real estate office has been mentioned numerous times. My daughter's friend works for that real estate office, and because it was mentioned so many times, she's not a Sudden Valley real estate or a resident. Her signs were trashed when she was doing open houses. I think when we're doing things, I think we need to be really careful about mentioning people's businesses. If someone is associated or works in a business, talk about the person, but don't please keep talking about a business because she had a couple of open houses that were affected. She had nothing to do with it. And I think, going forward, we just need to be really, really careful a bit because there's a lot of people that work in that office and it's really not fair that it keeps being mentioned. And I
think it is fair, Taimee, because it's the only thing we had.
It's not fair to trash a young mother's livelihood. It's just not.
Actually, Morgan had her hand up. So Morgan, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I do. Is there a motion afoot or a plan afoot to require that a petition have an associated person to contact or a point of contact? Or because I don't think they should have been allowed to submit a petition anonymously.
I agree.
And it's absurd to me that was even accepted. And can we firm that?
Yeah, why don't we talk about that during the bylaw discussion? How about that? Okay, let us do that.
We did in this petition process addendum say that you should have a cover letter with a contact name. But I don't know that we can require it. I've just shown you what happens when you don't. If you don't have a name out there, you do not become part of the process. And that is the penalty for being anonymous. It's your choice. You want to be anonymous? Fine. You also get stuck with, I will use every bit of statistics I can think of to find out not who you are, but where you are, which is why I did the analysis that came up with 66% of the signatures came from gates 1 and 2. I wouldn't have normally done that. That was an effort to uncover the anonymousness of that exercise.
It was a little inappropriate to try to target Gates, but I'm not going to keep arguing with you because it's just going to go on all night. But it was, especially hurting someone's business when
nobody here trashed those signs. So if you have a problem with signs being trashed, take it up with the people who did it.
How would I know?
People here operated on the information they had. If that information was inaccurate or incomplete, then the person who put that on there should be the person who's apologizing.
And you're right, Morgan.
It's also, I'd like to say this, it's also very inappropriate for business that promotes itself as community minded to initiate or assist with a recall effort against the sitting board. They created a lot of divide within this community. It's very disappointing. They profit. This is a type of business that profits off of the turmoil and change, because when people are satisfied, they don't move away from this community. At one point last year, we had no homes on the market. So it's to their benefit to create this divide in this community, so people don't want to be here anymore. They profit off of the sales of our homes. So I think that if your friend, your daughter's friend, is offended by what occurred, she should take it up with the realtors who were promoting people to sign the petition recall at their place of business. That should not have been, that was so unprofessional of them as well. It wasn't appropriate for someone who says they care about this community, a business who says they're community minded, to create divide and discourse among this community. It was totally inappropriate of them as well.
I have some other opinions on what you said, but I think this is going to escalate, and I think it's best that we drop this.
Sam?
I also want to point out that Nancy didn't say anybody's name, and she didn't say anybody's business. She said a website to a real estate business. She didn't give a name, and she didn't give a name of a business.
We please, because as I said, this is going to escalate. So I think that we should be a bit professional, and we should let it
Yes,
go.
we should.
Everybody's had their say, and I think we need to be professional and let this go.
Sam has not yet has his say. And he's muted.
Yes, I would like to move on, and if there's nothing else to vote on, just continue with the agenda.
We would like to take this petition process addendum and add it to the back of our entity manual. It represents a fair amount of work, and it is something that people who are going to do petitions in the future should read and look at, because it will help them put together and manage a petition drive instead of just winging it. So I would like to make a motion that the board endorse putting this petition process addendum as it would be, I think it's addendum number D, which puts it in the back of the entity manual, just so it won't mess up any page numbering, which was a real pain to do. Yeah, it will be addendum D. So I move that the board approve putting the petition process addendum as addendum D in the back of the entity manual. Second.
Okay.
Okay.
Any discussion on the specific addendum? Sonia?
I know, Nancy, you guys did a ton of work on this, and I'm very grateful. I would like to propose that maybe we revisit it next week. I'll tell you why, because I keep trying. I didn't have time to review it, and I'm really, really sorry. But I've been trying to hurry and look through the laws, because I just want to make sure that we don't need to have the division of lot number in there and everything. And just, I get what you're trying to do. I want to make sure that we have all those pieces in there. Did you guys review the RCWs and the bylaws and everything to make sure that we hit all the notes of as far as what's required on a petition?
I think it is.
Okay.
It's really something that would be found in RCW as opposed to a bylaw, because division lot is not the world's most common thing. And Sonia, were you attempting to amend my motion?
No, I really was just
I was on the floor.
Okay. It's okay. Never mind. I'm good.
And it's been seconded. So can we vote and move on?
Yeah. All those in favor? All right, that passes.
Thank you.
And we will move on to the capital request. So Mike in maintenance put together the capital request here. And it's for a new roadside mower. The mower has a number of attachments that are going to help it with snow removal efforts as well. And basically the old mower is falling apart and does not work adequately enough to be regularly used and be available on a timely basis. So yeah, the memo is included in the packet. Basically it's around $101,000. And yeah, there's he outlines a number of attachments that are included in that cost. Discussion on that. I got Sam and then Morgan.
Okay, I'll go. Pretty pricey piece of equipment. I understand after reading that matching up the equipment's critical. I would also like to match up the personnel to that equipment, because since it's not the same as driving a truck, I would like to know that there's some training and a moderate certificate, the same as operating aerial platforms. You just don't throw people on it and say, well, they know how to start it. And it's a safety item that they're going to be on the roadside running these things. And that's a pretty pricey piece of equipment. I'd like to see it last and be taken care of. And so is there any way to include a training certificate or a training plan for those guys and girls?
You're muted.
I was going to agree with Sam. I don't see why it can't be included as like a part of the motion or something, that training needs to come along with that. Mike does have a plan for snowplow training through the equipment providers. So that is scheduled. So I don't see any reason why the board can't request, to show us that plan.
Morgan.
You say there is a list of accessories. Is the plow one of them? And 2, how much did we spend on the baby plow service contract? And will this be replacing that? Will we still be hiring the guy with the baby plow? Or would there be savings involved since we're not contracting him?
I believe we still be contracting with baby plow. This is to do some like smaller areas that are not as easily accessible with our bigger full-size plows, because this is basically a roadside mower first and foremost, with the capability of performing some tasks during winter snow removal periods and stuff, like being able to get it better around the mailboxes, things like that. I believe.
And if once they plowed the main roads, so last year, because it was so bad, there were times where the main roads were plowed, but the baby plow contract, they had to bring in like a second driver, right, for the roads that they were contracted under. So this would allow us to set up something where if once we've taken care of all of our main roads with the big plows, then we could utilize that, and it would help supplement and save us a little bit on the additional extra costs that we have to pay them.
So is the snow plow one of the attachments?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
And Joel, do you know what the number is last year, what we spent on the contract with the league?
Actually, that's what I'm looking up right now. So like in 2021 for snow removal services, which you'll see that maintenance under GL 6442, it's about $70,000. $70,081. And I know in 2022, we spent about 14,000 or so, because obviously that last snow event, moved off into January.
Gotcha. Okay. All right.
All right, well, I'll make a motion that the board of directors approve the allocation of $101,617.02 from the SURF for purchasing a new roadside mower with attachments and the sale of existing unit through consignment at the tractor dealership.
Second.
Are we going to add about providing the certification for the training?
We can, I'll just do a second motion with that
Okay.
just to keep it clean.
Okay.
All right, all those in favor? All right, I'll make a second motion that the board of directors request staff to bring back a training program to ensure staff has the abilities and skills needed to run this piece of equipment.
Second.
All those in favor? All right. And move on to the proposed bylaw amendment, and I'll pass it over to Sonia.
Okay. So I'll start, and then more, if everybody's okay with it, then since the agenda item is bylaw amendment for the AGM, then Morgan can put hers forward when we're done. How about that? Okay, so I'll just kind of quickly read this. So over the last few years or several years, all of us have heard the concerns of members regarding the fact that Area Y, Area Z, the campground, and the airstrip are not held in trust for the benefit of the members. That means these parcels can be sold off by a vote of the board or leased for 99 years for $1. So this is a board discussion to determine if we should take a vote to include on the AGM ballot a bylaw amendment that would prevent a board from selling SVCA non-trust lands without a vote of the membership. This bylaw amendment will require the board to cede its authority to the membership. This particular authority exists generally because the membership cannot be expected to be as well informed as the board on such issues, and the board is generally in the best position to make these types of decisions. However, in specific instances, such as the sale of non-trust lands valued at millions and millions of dollars, we as a board can cede certain authority to the membership in order to protect SVCA against potential future actions by a future board. So the question is, should the board cede its authority to the membership regarding the sale on SVCA property not held in trust for the benefit of the members?
I have a question.
Go for it.
Is there a way to move that property into a trust with only a vote of the board to protect it?
Mm-mm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Once they've been removed, they're out.
So our non-trust lands are the ones that, number one, we don't pay taxes on, and they're basically the common areas, the green space, that type of thing. But these are potentially buildable type lands, which, I mean, you guys probably recall, I don't know, a month or two ago, an former GM called in telling us we need to sell Area Y for condos. This is something that, and Sam knows this, that's been talked about for a few years now, because members have been concerned about this back when the revitalization plan was in process. There was talk of either leasing at a long-term lease at a low dollar amount, or just outright selling it, and the members have no control. These could be sold at under market, as we saw in a lot of our Sun Valley owned lots occurred just a few years ago. I mean, the one next to me sold for whatever, $3,000 and then turned around and sold for 125.
Nancy and I are suffering the same pain.
Right. And so, but this is because all of these properties are valued at millions of dollars, and they're large pieces, they're parcels, they're not just like a lot here and there. Again, the question is, because normally that protection where it's the board that makes that decision, it exists for a very specific reason, a very real positive reason. But under these circumstances, most HOAs don't hold these type of assets and this type of land. So it's a matter of, does this board want to put on the AGM ballot and give the membership the opportunity to control those non-trust lands? But that would require the board ceding its board authority given to it by the law. So we don't give it up unless the members actually, like, we put it on the AGM ballot, and if the members approve it, then they have the authority. We no longer have it. But it's up to us whether or not we allow the membership to have a vote on that.
Just to be clear, so the discussion tonight is this something we want to bring? We obviously have to write a bylaw amendment still. So the goal tonight would be to come to a consensus on if we bring a bylaw amendment to the next meeting when we vote on the budget, to vote on that officially with all the language with it. Sorry, go ahead, Morgan.
No, I would support anything that would keep those being open land and not built. So if that's the way to do it, if we can't add the golf course and area and the airstrip to the green belt to protect it, then yes, that's what we need to do.
So the golf course is a trust property.
I don't mean the golf course. I mean the airstrip, area wide.
Okay.
Okay.
Like
Go ahead, Sam.
Yeah, that's an excellent move as far as I'm concerned, because it takes candy out of the candy jar. That it's just tempting as hell for someone, or some folks who come in here and pull a vote and just pull something horrible.
I agree.
And piss everybody off. And and I don't see a problem turning that over. It's like it may interrupt at some time if the board or the Sudden Valley ends up getting properties back because of non-payments or whatever that may be. It may have a little interference on some smaller stuff, but I don't see a problem with that. It's just a great idea, because I've also heard it from the same people that say, once you sell it, it's gone. But then some of those same people were saying we should sell it because of X amount of money would do something for the place. So can't have it both ways. And I think we ought to lock that down tighter and not rely on the board and that's definitely something I would like to see the members have a chance to sign off on. Thank you.
One more thing. Can you add that that leasing that property would be subject to a membership vote as well?
So that would be a separate bylaw amendment.
Okay.
It's also a little more complicated. So we did talk to the attorney about that because that was a concern. So we asked for advice on that, and it may be better in that situation that we put a policy together, board policy, and just hope that the board adheres to it. The reason for that being that if we put a bylaw that said you can't lease for less than, whatever, 5 or 10% under fair market value, then it would have prevented the association from allowing the library to come in, which a lot of people see as a benefit. So there's a lot of things like that we would potentially be tying the hands of a future board that is something that's a little more, we wanted. So what we could do is pass a policy where we actually are saying that any leases will endeavor to rent at at least X amount near fair market rental, right? And so, and if they're not going to be that, then there has to be real justification for that. But if we make it a bylaw, it may restrict some opportunities. Well, like the disc golf, for instance, we
Right.
wouldn't have them. Go ahead, Nancy.
Yeah, would this be a majority vote?
For the bylaw amendment? Yeah, it would be a bylaw amendment. So it's like, what, 2/3 vote?
Oh, to approve the amendment. But are you saying a vote of the membership to approve a sale? Would that
Well, I
be?
mean, we could write it. You're asking, should it be a super majority or should it just be a simple majority?
Yes.
What do you think it should be?
Super majority.
Okay. Or we could ask the attorney for his advice.
Now, I'm not sure we would be allowed to do the supermajority. So I'd hate to have it voided because we put it in. So I think it's something that maybe the attorney could weigh on. The thing about it is, the membership might see something they want to sell it for. And the majority of the membership votes for it, provided it's not a stealth election sort of thing. But, it's something to ask the attorney. Would it be a supermajority or a simple majority for approval?
Richard will be helping us craft the specific language, so.
Do we need a motion to send it to the attorney?
I think we can obviously we have to have the attorney review our bylaw amendments before we approve them. But I'll just make a motion that the board of directors, or that the board draft with legal counsel's support a bylaw amendment for requiring a vote of the membership to sell non-trust lands and bring it back to the next meeting. Second. Any other discussion on that topic?
Can we add a bylaw amendment saying that any petitions have to have a point of
Right, we
contact?
need to finish this one first.
Yeah, we could.
We're gonna finish this first.
Yeah, let's talk about that one next.
Okay.
All right, call the question on the non-trust land. All those in favor? All right, we'll work with Richard on that and bring some back next week. All right, so what were you thinking, Morgan?
That we include language that change the bylaws to require that petitions have a point of contact of a Sudden Valley resident for any petitions. Or
Second. I'm good with that.
yeah,
That's a good idea. A Sudden Valley member.
right. Yes, yes.
Sam?
This will also be on the AGM and require 66% or supermajority.
Yeah, any bylaw amendment will.
Yeah. I think the trust land one will be enthusiastically received. But we'll see.
Yeah, I don't have any issues with some simple language that just requires a representative.
Who is a member?
Yes.
All right, well, I'll make a motion that the board work on drafting a bylaw amendment to include or require petitions to have a member, Sun Valley member representative when they're submitted.
Second.
Any further discussion on that? All those in favor?
I wish I could vote for that, but I'm a non-voting member. So
All
thank you.
right. Does anybody else have any bylaw proposals or things that we think we should consider? All right, hearing none, we will move to adjournment. I move that we adjourn at 8:43.
Second.
All those in favor?